On the morning of June 4, 1996, the European Space Agency was ready to make history. Sitting on a launch pad in French Guiana was the Ariane 5, a massive next-generation rocket designed to secure Europe's dominance in space for decades to come. This was not just a rocket, it was a billion-dollar promise. It carried 4 specialized solar wind satellites, known as cluster. The engineers had spent 10 years designing the engines, the aerodynamics, and the guidance systems. They believed it was perfect. At 9:34 a.m., the engines ignited. The rocket lifted off the pad, climbing perfectly into the sky. For 30 seconds, everything was nominal. The trajectory was clean, the velocity was increasing. And then, at 37 seconds, the Ariane 5 suddenly veered 90 degrees off course. The aerodynamic forces ripped the massive vehicle apart. As the rocket disintegrated, the onboard safety system triggered a self-destruct sequence. A fireball erupted 4 kilometers above the Earth, raining burning debris into the swamps below. In less than a minute, $370 million and a decade of work had vaporized. The engineers stared at their screens in silence. There was no engine failure, no fuel leak, no external sabotage. The hardware had worked perfectly. The killer was invisible. It was a single line of code that had been running flawlessly for years on the older Ariane 4 rockets. But when it met the sheer power of the Ariane 5, it encountered a mathematical impossibility. This is the story of the integer overflow, the most expensive software bug in history. To understand the crash, you have to understand the computer's limitation. Inside the rocket's inertial reference system, the software was tracking the vehicle's horizontal bias, a value related to its sideways velocity. The computer stored this value as a 64-bit floating point number. This format can handle massive numbers with high precision. But further down the line, the software needed to convert this value into a 16-bit signed integer for a different part of the system. A 16-bit integer is a small container. It can only hold numbers between minus 32,768 and plus 32,777. On the older, slower Ariane 4 rocket, the horizontal velocity never got high enough to exceed this limit. The number always fits safely inside the box. The engineers assumed this would always be true. They were so confident that they explicitly removed the safety check that would catch an overflow error, arguing that it wasted precious processor cycles. But the Ariane 5 was a beast. It was faster, heavier, and flew a steeper trajectory. At 36 seconds after liftoff, the horizontal velocity of the new rocket exceeded 32,777. The 64-bit number grew too large to fit into the 16-bit container. In computer science, when you try to force a large number into a small space, it doesn't just stop. It wraps around. It overflows. The guidance computer didn't know how to handle the spillover. It threw an exception, a software panic. The primary guidance computer shut down instantly. The backup computer running the exact same code encountered the exact same number and also shut down. But before they died, they dumped a diagnostic error code into the memory channel. The autopilot read this error code, but it didn't see error. It interpreted the binary pattern as flight data. Specifically, it thought the rocket was suddenly pitching wildly to the side. To correct a turn that wasn't happening, the autopilot swiveled the massive engine nozzles to the hard limit. This violent jerk caused the rocket to actually turn, ripping the boosters off the core stage. The rest was gravity and fire. The investigation that followed was brutal. The inquiry board found that the specific module that failed wasn't even needed after liftoff. It was a piece of alignment code, useful only on the ground, left running for 40 seconds into the flight, just in case of a hold. They found that the safety checks had been disabled specifically for this variable to save processing power, a decision made years earlier for a weaker processor on a slower rocket. They essentially copy-pasted code from a minivan into a Formula One car and were surprised when the speedometer broke. The Ariane 5 disaster is now the classic textbook example of software engineering failure. It teaches us that code is not universal. Software that is safe in one context can be lethal in another. It also highlights the danger of optimization. The engineers removed a safety check to save a few milliseconds of processing time. That optimization cost $370 million. Today, integer overflows are still a threat. They are the mechanism behind some of the most dangerous hacks in cybersecurity, allowing attackers to crash servers or execute malicious code. We have built better tools to catch them, but the fundamental math hasn't changed. If you try to put a big number in a small box, something has to break. Sometimes it's a website, sometimes it's a rocket.